Welcome back. Today we're going to look at two words that, if you read Neville Goddard, you see all the time. If you listen to any of his lectures, you hear them all the time. Assume and surrender. Those are the two words we're going to see what they actually mean. Because how many times have you heard the word, "Oh, don't assume because you make an ass out of you and me"? Well, there's our first mistake. This is why I think sometimes we're so clouded in our judgment. And to surrender, people think if you surrender that you relinquish your power. Well, let's hear the actual definition. To assume means to take or begin to have power or responsibility. Assume, take or begin to have power or responsibility, or begin to have a specified quality, appearance, or extent. To assume. So when Neville says, assume that your wish is fulfilled, he says, begin or have power or responsibility. Now, what does surrender mean? Surrender. Abandon oneself entirely to a powerful emotion or influence or give into. I often look at surrender from the standpoint of having a lover. A lover is someone who, has your happiness in mind, your greatest pleasure. And in order to surrender, you must trust who you're giving into. So when Neville says surrender, who are you surrendering to? Yourself. So then why would we fight and struggle against ourselves? Your subconscious is like a lover, always giving you what you desire, good, bad, or indifferent, according to Neville. Assume and surrender. Now let us read. Neville is talking about answered prayers. Have you ever had a prayer answered? What wouldn't men give just to feel certain that when they pray, something definite would happen? For this reason, I would like to take a little time to see why it is that some prayers are answered and some apparently fall on dry ground. When we pray, believe that ye receive, and ye shall receive. Believe that ye receive is the condition imposed upon man. Unless we believe that we receive, our prayer will not be answered. A prayer granted implies that something is done in consequence of the prayer which otherwise would not have been done. Therefore, the one who prays is the spring of action, the directing mind, and the other who grants the prayer. Such responsibility man refuses to assume, for responsibility, it seems, is mankind's invisible nightmare. The whole natural world is built on law, yet between prayer and its answer we see no such relation. We feel that God may answer or ignore our prayer, that our prayer may hit the mark or may miss it. The mind is still unwilling to admit that God subjects himself to his own laws. How many people believe that there is, between prayer and its answer, a relation of cause and effect? Prayer is the elevation of the mind to that which we seek. The very first word of correction is always, arise. Always lift the mind to that which we seek. This is easily done by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. How would you feel if your prayer were answered? Well, assume that feeling until you experience in imagination what you would experience in reality if your prayer were answered. Prayer means getting into action mentally. It means holding the attention upon the idea of the wish fulfilled until it fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of the consciousness. This statement that prayer means getting into action mentally and holding the attention upon the idea of the wish fulfilled until it fills the mind and crowds all other ideas out of the consciousness does not mean that prayer is a mental effort, an act of will. On the contrary, prayer is to be contrasted with an act of will. Prayer is a surrender. It means abandoning oneself to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If prayer brings no response, there is something wrong with the prayer, and the fault lies generally in too much effort. Serious confusion arises insofar as men identify the state of prayer with an act of will, instead of contrasting it with an act of will. The sovereign rule is to make no effort, and if this is observed, you will intuitively fall into the right attitude. Creativeness is not an act of will, but a deep receptiveness, a keener susceptibility. The acceptance of the end, the acceptance of the answered prayer finds the means for its realization. Feel yourself into the state of the answered prayer until the state fills the mind and crowds all other states out of your consciousness. What we must work for is not the development of the will, but the education of the imagination and the steadying of attention. Prayer succeeds by avoiding conflict. Prayer is, above all things, easy. Its greatest enemy is effort. The mighty surrenders itself fully only to that which is most gentle. The wealth of heaven may not be seized by a strong will, but surrenders itself, a free gift, to the God-spent moment. Along the lines of least resistance, travel spiritual as well as physical forces. We must act on the assumption that we already possess that which we desire, for all that we desire is already present within us. It only waits to be claimed. That it must be claimed is a necessary condition by which we realize our desires. Our prayers are answered if we assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and continue in that assumption. One of the loveliest examples of an answered prayer I witnessed in my own living room. A very charming lady from out of town came to see me concerning prayer. As she had no one with whom to leave her 8-year-old son, she brought him with her the time of our interview. Seemingly he was engrossed in playing with a toy truck. But at the end of the interview with his mother, he said, "Mr. Neville, I know how to pray now. I know what I want, a collie puppy. And I can imagine I am hugging him every night on my bed." His mother explained to him and to me the impossibilities of his prayer. The cost of the puppy, their confined home, even his inability to care for the dog properly. The boy looked into his mother's eyes and simply said, "But, Mother, I know how to pray now." And he did. 2 months later, during a Kindness to Animals Week in his city, all the school children were required to write an essay on how they would love and care for a pet. You have guessed the answer. His essay, out of the 5,000 submitted, won the prize. And that prize, presented by the mayor of the city to the lad, was a collie puppy. The boy truly assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled, hugging and loving his puppy every night. Our prayers are answered by the powers we invoke, not by those we exert. So long as the eyes take notice, the soul is blind. For the world that moves us is the one we imagine, not the world round about us. We must yield our whole being to the feeling of being the noble one we want to be. If anything is kept back, the prayer is vain. We often are deprived of our high goal by our effort to possess it. We are called upon to act on the assumption that we already are the man we would be. If we do this without effort, experiencing in imagination what we would experience in the flesh had we realized our goal, we shall find that we do indeed possess it. The healing touch is in our attitude. We need change nothing but our attitude towards it. Assume a virtue if you have it not. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Pray for my soul, more things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of.